Welcome back, everybody. So final section is on fire and Arizona, or fire in Arizona, if you prefer, which you don't. Okay, this is a fire that happened about 30 miles northeast of Phoenix. This is the great so-called bush fire of 2020, which we will look at. But first, so Arizona has a number of factors that can intensify fire, but it's going to be more intense in some places than others. Broadly speaking, more intense fires are actually going to be in this northern part of the state, the so-called Colorado Plateau, right? All this stuff up north, which in many ways, environmentally, geologically, ecologically, is pretty much a completely different state from the stuff in the middle as we transition to all the stuff in the southern part of the state. And we can see this directly reflected when we look at the biomes, right? So this is elevation over here, right? So wherever we see these darker colors, that means higher up, right? And we can see our Grand Canyon coming through here. Greener colors mean lower to the ground. And, oh, I feel bad saying this. I want to say Phoenix is something like right here. Somebody can clown on me in the notes. Okay. So Arizona's biomes, right? All this tan stuff is going to be desert, but notice, right, we have so many more biomes available at these higher elevations, right? And they're not deserts, right? These are our woodlands, so we need fuel in order to get fire, a lot more fuel up here. Forests, right, broadly speaking, and even down in this southeast part of the state, we have more elevation and lots of changes in elevation. And so we get a number of different biomes there. Not so bad in the desert where we are, and notice also how elevation influences the ecological diversity, right? Influences ecosystem level biodiversity, as we called it. Awesome. So the state of the issue, right? Are fires bad? Yes or no? The answer is yes, and getting worse, right? So something like twice as bad today as it was 40 or 50 years ago, broadly speaking, as a rule of thumb, especially in northern Arizona. Now, this could probably be a good pause point or recall point. What do you think the major factors are that are making fires worse in Arizona? Okay, well, if you got at least some of these, that's good, right? So wind, that one can't necessarily be controlled, although I want to say it can be made worse, broadly speaking, by climate, cause erratic meteorological behaviors, even more unpredictable than it is before. Drought. So I kind of hold off talking about the big so-called southwestern U.S. mega drought, which has been going on for something like 20 years. We come back when we do water resources and really dig into this one. But you remember before when we were looking at Hawaii, how most everything was down in these categories, and that was still enough to contribute and make the fire worse? Well, now this is 2021, not right now, but it's pretty bad. For the most part, there are lots of areas that are down in the most extreme cases of how bad a drought can even be. Thought to be among the worst droughts in hundreds or even thousands of years that's going on right now. Major factors. Wind, drought is one of them, so record high temperatures. As a result of climate change, we have extreme temperatures, and that includes high temperatures. Invasive species. It's true here. It's true in Hawaii. It's definitely true because of the stink net, aka globe chamomile, the terrible yellow color, and then population. So this has two sorts of effects, right? So the first part of it is, most fires are going to be human caused, though not on purpose, right? And also, now that there's more population, there's more impact of the fires. Like the cost in terms of money, in terms of damages, destruction, resources lost, and human lives goes up exponentially with population, which was already increasing exponentially to begin with. So not good. The damage costs, right, the amount of loss associated with these disasters balloons so much faster than the disasters themselves get worse, if that makes sense. In other words, if the disaster is just a little bit worse than it was before, and you have highly concentrated population centers, urbanization, then you get much worse results. Okay. The bushfire, right? So we talked about this here, right? So this is what this is a picture of. So going to be northeast of Phoenix in something like this area here, where it starts to get woody, the so-called chaparral biomes. This was in 2020, complicated by COVID, especially. I want to say it happened in June of 2020. This is worse than anything has been, at least in recent memory. It's also right before I got here, so sorry. This was technically in Tonto National Forest, which is a massive, massive national forest. Extends over many, many acres. This one was not the worst fire ever. So we talked about how the fire in Texas going on right now, 2024, burned something like 1 million acres. This one is more like 100,000, but still pretty bad for Arizona, and pretty bad generally speaking. It was visible from space. That's what it looked like. Complicated by COVID factors since it happened during June. Just as another thing for us to talk about is roadside fires in Arizona. We live in a dry state, but even considering that dryness, right, notice where these tend to be concentrated is in woodier areas, especially up north, even though this is not where the people are, right? People are highly concentrated here, but areas down in the southeast, we have those other biomes, woodier, more forested, we get roadside fires. Why do these roadside fires happen? There's a number of reasons. There's a number of them listed here. Dragging tow chains would be a specific one. Hot undercarriage, broadly speaking. So people have a vehicle and they pull off onto the side of the road and they're right above some sort of really, really dense, dry or dead vegetation. That can cause fires. Tire blowouts would probably be number 3 on the list, though that one can't necessarily be controlled the way that the others can. And then the final way that a vehicle can start a wildfire is by the person in it smoking a cigarette and then throwing it out the window. So stop doing that. And that's going to wrap up our section on fire, or our unit on fire. So the first big question, what is fire? How does it work? What does it need? What are those elements of the fire triangle? And we could maybe even remember, right, not just the fire triangle, but also the products of fire. Releases carbon dioxide, releases incomplete combustion products, things like carbon monoxide and other bad stuff and pollutants, releases water vapor, releases energy. Awesome. In what ways does fire affect the environment? Some of it is good, a lot of it is bad, right? So this is a stressor that a lot of ecosystems have adapted to, or the organisms in them have adapted to, and suppressing fires is not really a good thing. In fact, if anything, some controlled burning or simply not intervening is better than trying to suppress them or exert too much control over it. Small fire is good, a lot is bad, and we talked about this idea of ecological succession, right? So after a fire, things don't just come back exactly the way that they did before. There are stages of ecological communities that come back in a specific order that generally increase in complexity and richness in biodiversity over time, but that process is very slow. We talked about fire as a hazard to human beings, right? As well as some of the historical stuff, so ways that fire has been important. Big thing, right? So the impacts of fire hazards depends on environmental conditions, not like, earthquakes, which don't care about wind. Wind, moisture or dryness or drought, temperatures, and elevation, right? So fire likes to travel uphill, wind will bring it uphill. You got more mountains, valleys, makes it worse. Air pollution is another consequence of this, along with loss of life and destruction of property. So if we were talking about the consequences of wildfire as a hazard, air pollution, loss of life, destruction of property, be a good list to have in mind. How does fire affect us in Arizona? We talked about a specific example with a bushfire. We talked about those conditions in Arizona that make it worse than it might have otherwise been. We talked about which parts of Arizona and which biomes are most affected, as well as why they are most affected. And I think that rounds it up. Thank you so much.